Hey folks, so the past week in the My Hero Academia universe has been absolutely ridiculous, and what I mean by that is over in My Hero Academia's anime, you got the beginning of My Villain Academia. In My Hero Academia Vigilantes, the protagonist activated Ultra Instinct and the main bad guy has become a monster. And now here in My Hero Academia, we have the end of what I would call the Deku retrieval arc. But narratively speaking, out of the three, My Hero Academia's manga is the one that gets more done story-wise. In comparison to the anime, the vibe of the manga is just different, it's refreshing. So when we head inside to talk about what I think might happen in chapter 325 of My Hero Academia, it's gonna be pretty spoilery. So if you're not caught up to the current manga, be sure to catch up and then come on back. Though if you do enjoy today's theory and review, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. But now, let's head inside and grab ourselves a drink. Welcome to the bar, folks. Alright, so now that the spoiler warning has been said, how about that chapter? I'd be lying if I didn't say at some points I was ugly crying, but panel after panel warranted tears. But while this chapter was mega emotional, it's definitely one of those chapters you want to read again. There's a lot of context to take in from Horikoshi when he draws a scene. He's a master of telling a story with his pencil alone. And it just so happens that I'm also a sucker for continuity as well. And anytime I see something that's a nod or an homage, I can't help but get a little bit giddy. But I don't want to say too much without providing any context. So let's head over to the wall right now and let's discuss chapter 324 and predict what's going to happen in chapter 325. Okay, so the way that chapter 324 ends definitely has us believing that Deku's going to be accepted back into UA's refugee camp. Because the one thing that I have really been enjoying recently is rereading all of the past chapters. The foreshadowing of Heroic Society's collapse and everything that's happening right now, it's just been thrown in our faces since the beginning of the series. Because what this arc does well is it follows through with its foreshadowing. The payoff was absolutely there. They foreshadowed this for years, and this is your foreshadowed moment. What the past 10 chapters have done is shown us the severity of the situation taking place in Japan. We knew that cities around Japan were falling to villains, but we've never known to what extent. Between seeing abandoned cities and a literal underground tunneling system to avoid villains, it's gotten pretty bad. It also shows that the peace that All Might created was kind of a false and fragile peace. The minute he retired, the shit hit the fan. Think about it real quick. The Camino arc happens, and then 7 months later, the war arc and the jailbreak. And granted, right now, it's almost like the main bad guy of this series is All For One, and Shigaraki is taking a bit of a back seat, which makes me wonder what the future of that situation is going to be as well. Because I think at this point, it's kind of inevitable that Shigaraki kills the physical form of All For One before he has to go inside the one that's inside of his head. And this is where I say something that might come off kind of controversial. I think that the problem is that there is a symbol of peace. Because when that symbol of peace disappears, this is what you get. All Might accepted this burden, this crusade, and shouldered every aspect of this alone. Because if Deku does what All Might did, all he does is perpetuate that same type of fragile and false peace. And that's kind of what I took away from the situation when I saw the last panel of the chapter. When the panel changes to "This is how we became the greatest heroes," it takes the burden off of Deku. What it tells me is this is going to be the generation that does away of titles like the symbol of peace and the symbol of evil. Oh, and see this guy right here? He was very quick to follow everyone to a shelter at a hero school. But the thing that pissed me off the most about him was his selfishness and his entitlement towards being saved. He wears an All Might shirt, which means at his core, he trusts heroes. He trusted them enough that when he chose his place of refuge, he chose UA. But his entitlement around being saved revolves around, oh, you're a hero, go do your job and only come around if I need you. It's being ignorant to the fact that Ochako says, everyone here is your neighbor, and they need your help as well. Ochako is trying to help the people acknowledge that, yes, heroes are heroes, but they are still people as well, and people need to be able to rest. The problem is, society, or rather heroic society in general, has only given the general public the idea that heroes are only there to save and serve. And while he's a fanboy enough to wear a t-shirt flaunting his love for heroes, this is how he truly feels. He could be the person that's also selling dismay amongst the community and possibly is the UA traitor as well. I'm not going to just go that far though and try to, belay suspicion off myself. Anyway, that aside, the past 2 chapters have put Ochako in the spotlight. Between her and Ida, Deku is probably just gonna pass out from all of these emotions. I think Ochako did succeed in her objective, and that chapter 325 will definitely have the civilians of UA accepting Deku within its walls. My favorite part of the chapter was seeing little Kota take off the minute he saw his hero drop to his knees though. Cause look, in my opinion, the future of this universe has a limitless roof. If quirks are still a thing by the end of the series, I can totally envision Kota being a pro hero. And I think more than just those 2 are going to come out of the crowd and be like, hey, that kid saved me. I think there's going to be a few more people that pop out of nowhere. And while I'd hate to dwell on him too much, but I love the irony of this character so much. Because his intentions are wrong. But is he really wrong here? The way that this society was molded caused a guy to become a person who fawns over heroes. And at the same time, he holds them accountable for every cataclysm available. And that's not his fault though. That's what society did by creating a quote-unquote pro-hero. The Billboard rankings show you the greatest hero, or what it could be easier referred to as, the one who shoulders unrealistic burdens and when they fail become a nuisance and pariah to the public. So now that it's pretty much all but guaranteed that Deku is going to end up back within the walls of UA, I can't help but think that a certain type of situation is unfolding, and I like to call that the sitting duck situation. Because the way that I see it, All For One has been constantly sending assassins after Deku, and Deku's been crushing villain after villain, so what's stopping All For One from continuing his attacks? If Deku takes down a villain to show every single civilian they're in good hands, nothing like learning up front and personal, right? And afterwards, they could activate the UA barrier and have Deku rest up as UA changes locations. Principal Nezu took the time to further explain the UA barrier and how it works, and on top of that, they even mentioned Shiketsu, because to be quite honest, there's a chance that the plot could even split from there and we see Stain meeting up with All Might. There's tons of different ways the story can pivot from this arc, but I feel like the next incident is encroaching. Moving UA means moving Deku away from All Might, and for a short time that makes Deku unable to apologize for his harsh words. Deku has just had his whole world shooken up. He's absolutely wanting to make amends with his master, especially because of how he left things. And All Might always said that he wouldn't die until there was nothing left to teach Deku, which makes me wonder if All Might get Uncle Bend and we might have something like this unfolding. Either way, an attack immediately after Deku arrives is probably inevitable. Moving locations gives time for Deku to at least kinda sleep. And they keep on mentioning that goddamn UA barrier, so now it's time to see if they can whip an entire campus across Japan. As for All Might, it'll be interesting to see if he just spontaneously shows up, or if Horikoshi is gonna give us a little bit of an All Might arc while Deku rests up. When a character falls out of commission for a short amount of time, it's the perfect opportunity to do a side arc featuring someone else as the main character. Bleach used to do this all the time, and sometimes alleviating the weight of the situation by putting your main character in training or resting while having your characters do the setup is the operable idea. And if 325 doesn't have that new conflict, it's definitely shaping up to be the chapter that precedes conflict. And to be quite honest, I could see chapter 325 or chapter 326 moving in 3 different directions. The first direction is a villain shows up to take down Deku, and Deku floors the villain in front of the entire populace of UA. 2, he passes out, gets carried inside, and then for like 2 or 3 chapters, we have another side character that takes the reins and becomes the main character for a little bit. 3, Horikoshi pivots altogether and goes back to All Might or shifts over back to the villains. The one thing we all need to take into consideration is that the transition to the next arc is encroaching. So at this point, we should all be expecting the curveball. And I gotta say, this chapter was filled with so many emotions. Watching Deku buckle over like that, mirroring when All Might told him he could first be a hero, it was beautiful. By the civilians reaching out like that, it was almost like they were telling him that he is their hero. And when a hero needs to be saved from himself, it's the people who have inherited his goodness, they will rise up. Because that's what Deku did. When it came to sticking his neck out to save these 2 individuals, he did it. So when it comes down to him needing help, you better bet your ass that these 2 people are gonna step out to fight for him. And this chapter still featured characters that we've yet to hear from, like Eri and Eraserhead. I mean, his teacher has no eye and leg. Hopefully Eri can ex machina that one, because Aizawa's going through some shit right now. It's gonna be interesting to see what pans out in chapter 325, because throughout chapter 324, we were regaled with the fact that Deku is teetering on the line of a full psychotic episode. The amount of emotional torment that he's going through is disgusting. He's constantly haunted by the main antagonist of the series. That dream of becoming the greatest hero ever became riddled with holes and swamped with the fact that he had been roped into one of the biggest debacles to grace the planet. This immense responsibility has taken everything he knew about heroic society and twisted it like a marshmallow in a microwave. He's learned about corruption, heartache, betrayal, and deception, things a 16-year-old usually doesn't have to deal with. It kinda goes back to my controversial take on why a symbol of peace should not exist. The reason why the story is the way it is now in My Hero Academia is because of their reliance on a symbol of peace. Once that symbol disappeared, it gave way to everything else. Everyone's drive to replace that symbol of peace once All Might retired is what caused all of this. It's what caused this dependence on heroes. Because when it came time to be a hero, nobody stepped up. And because of that, one person shouldered the burden, kept the secrets for themselves, resulting in all of this chaos. So the problem with the symbol of peace is that there doesn't need to be one. Because when everybody out there, when they're in a convenience store, when they're just doing something on the street and they help out somebody, they themselves are the symbol of peace. You right now, sitting there at the bar, right here with me right now, you are the symbol of peace too. So I'll tell you what, I'm gonna pour this drink right here, I'm gonna say this. If you agree with my thoughts and you think that the symbol of peace doesn't need to exist, be sure to leave me a comment down below. And until next time, you can be a hero too. Cheers.